In this feast, let us get beyond the polite images and let's face what's going on here. It was a very polite translation of the gospel. Jesus heard it said to him, he's been there for 4 days, there will be an odour. Seems very polite, there will be an odour. It says in rather better translations, Lazarus has been dead in the 4 days, it is going to stink. We are faced not with an unpleasant odour that may get up our nose. We are faced with the corruption of death itself in all of its gory and unpleasant detail. Lazarus had been wrapped in the grave clothes and he'd been put in there in the great heat of Judea. And we can imagine what should have been expected. One thing we note in there is partial faith. There are those who said who were with his sisters, and there would probably have been a very big group supporting them, that support network. They said, oh, if only he could have been here. This man who's performed miracles already could probably have healed him. They had that much faith. What they didn't think was that the Christ who was coming could do more than heal a sick, living person. The Christ who was coming, even before his own resurrection, was going to demonstrate that he had the keys to life and to death. And this was done, that God may be glorified. We heard that in the Gospel. Of course, we celebrate this the day before Palm Sunday. And tomorrow we will celebrate a feast of excitement in which the children of the Hebrews in particular run with excitement before Christ on the donkey. And they lay palms before him and branches, and there are those that lay the clothes. The excitement of tomorrow is very much tied in with the celebration of today. In the West, it's forgotten because they don't have Lazarus Saturday. That tomorrow's events stem from this wonderful event that we see recounted in the icon. Imagine the reaction when those who were there, probably very skeptical, who probably stood back when that stone was moved, expecting flies, accepting a vile stench of death. Imagine their reaction when Lazarus shuffled out. And let's face it, he shuffled out like a child in a sleeping bag race, going, or a sack race, going along, because his feet are tied together and he is bound tightly. There's something almost comical as well as awe-inspiring in this figure that manages to somehow come through. To have been there must have been a life-changing event. Yes, miracles had been performed. The deaf had been made to hear, the blind had been made to see. We know that yes, there had been miracles and the dead had been brought to life, but not in this dramatic way. I think of when I was still teaching in London and of my Cypriot friends, and when somebody died and you would go to the house, and you would suddenly start thinking, how many people can you fit in one house? Because everybody seemed to be there. This would have been the case here. So when Christ said those words, Lazarus come forth, there was a crowd surrounding him. And that whole crowd went away with this awesome news. You will not believe what we have just seen happen. And that, of course, is what propels tomorrow's feast and the sheer ecstatic excitement of Palm Sunday. Again, we look at Western paintings, and again, it's also polite. People are waving their branches and they're looking on. This was probably more like a football crowd. They are shouting with joy. They are cheering. Some of them are probably crying with excitement. Because he who has just demonstrated that death He's already ours. He's the one who is riding, ironically, on the back of that lowly donkey. This prepared them for what to expect. Tomorrow we will remember, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And this goes back into Jewish expectation. Because the Messiah is the one who comes. It's not just a phrase, blessed is he who comes, who happens to come. O erchomenos in Greek is a phrase that means the one who is coming. The particular one, not anyone, the one. And tomorrow we remember the coming of the one. They didn't know what to expect. The events of Holy Week, the events of Good Friday, the events of Pascha, the empty tomb, the ascension after the resurrection had not yet happened. And yet we see that ecstasy there. What for us? They didn't know the full story. We know the full story. When we say the creed, the Vieru, we go through that whole story, that whole economy of redemption. So that we come to celebrate Palm Sunday with something that they didn't have. They were partway through this story. We know the lot. And we know the glory of that whole story. They didn't know what was coming that few days later, and yet we do. We will celebrate tomorrow, after this temporary resurrection of Lazarus. We will look forward to the events of Pascha. And when tomorrow we sing, Blagoslovien Griadi Voimia Gospodin, we will know that the one who is coming is the one who next week will lead us. And will lead us to his own tomb to show us where he was and where he is no longer. We will be led forward by the one who comes. So tomorrow, let us remember that we need to hold on desperately to the joy and the excitement of Palm Sunday, because it is the same joy and excitement of Pascha. Let's also remember that many of those who tomorrow in the Gospel will be cheering and screaming for Christ are the same people who later in the week will turn a blind eye to the man of sorrows, who stumbles beneath the cross, who is spat upon, who is beaten. They are the same people. Whilst we are not likely to do that, we must remember that when we become lukewarm or lazy spiritually, we also turn our face away from Christ. And let's face it, in every liturgy we sing, blessed is he who comes. When the priest brings the communion out, we sing, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Let us remember that having welcomed the same Lord on the donkey when he comes to us in the chalice, we must not be like those people who just in the course of a week become lukewarm, become apathetic, and then turn away when the unspeakable is done. We need to be saying every day of our lives, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Because spiritually, he comes to us every day. Spiritually and physically, he comes to us in every liturgy. And when we go from that liturgy, whether we've received communion or not, we should be going forward with the excitement of those children who in the icon we see climbing the trees, waving the branches, throwing the clothing down. This should be our faith. Our faith should be one of excitement, not of staid, very British reserve. There is no place for this when we are welcoming the Lord. We need our faith to be living, to be excited, and to be full of joy and hope. And this joy and hope will be the thing that carries us through all the sadness, through the trials, and for the difficulties that we have in our life. We need the counterbalance. And the excitement of faith in Christ is one thing that can carry us through the dark days. Of course, we say in the Psalms, "Yea, though I should walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me." And the one who is at our side in those dark times is the one who comes, is the one who raises Lazarus today, is the one who goes to his voluntary death and passion in the coming week. And yet, we know the end of the story. Next week, for the one who comes and who we call blessed, next week we will be saying that he is risen from the dead. Let us run with Christ into Jerusalem from Bethany with great excitement. And even when we go through these dark days of the Gospels in this week, of great sorrow and great sadness, we still do so with that joy in our heart and with that knowledge that this is the way to victory, this is the way to glory, and this is the way to the world being turned upside down and the whole universe, not for one day, but forever. That is the promise. So go from today, go from tomorrow, and be excited in your faith. When you finally hear those words, Christos voskresie next week, you should be feeling that you need to jump up and down on the spot and say, whoopee. You should feel that emotional energy. We don't talk about emotions very much in Orthodoxy because they do lead us potentially into some tricky places. And yet we should feel with every sinew the excitement of today's feast as we go through the week to the great glory that we will celebrate in the dawn of Easter Sunday. Amen.